All right, everybody. I'm going to teach you a few things about Adobe InDesign. When you first open up Adobe, you'll see this screen or something similar to it, and we will go ahead and just create a new document. And this is the new document settings screen. Up here you'll see the number of pages you want in your document. You can always change this later. Facing pages is the default. That means that you'll get 2 pages side by side in a 2-page spread. You can change the page size however you like, and you can do that here by typing in different widths and heights. Notice that the default unit of measurement is not inches or centimeters. It is picas and points. So right now it says 51 P0, that means 51 picas and 0 points. Just so you know, those are old typographic units of measurement. They don't get used too often anymore, and it's usually easier just to change this to something in inches. So if you type in 8 inches, IN, Adobe InDesign will accept that, and it will translate that into the appropriate number of picas and points for right now. You can change this default so that you see inches from the beginning if you want. If you want there to be columns on your document, then you can decide the number of columns you want right here. And the gutter is the space in between the columns. And then these are your margins. There are 6 picas in 1 inch, so 3 picas here is ½ an inch. That's fine for our margin, so I'll click OK. And here's our new document. We've got a letter size page. The first thing you can do, you can notice these rulers up here and down the left hand side. If you right click on these, you can change from picas, which is the default, to something a little bit more user friendly like inches. I like inches decimal. That's nice and easy. Now I have the ruler that makes sense to me most up top. We're going to focus on the drawing tools today. You should have down the left-hand side a whole set of different tools. Notice that the arrow right now is selected, so my pointer looks like an arrow, a black arrow to be precise. There's also a white arrow. We're going to be using both of these. This one's the direct selection tool. You can come back to it at any time by hitting the V key on your keyboard. Down here you'll see one called the rectangle frame tool, and underneath it is the ellipse tool. These tools have little black things in the lower right hand corner, which means that if you press down on that little arrow and hold the mouse key down, you will get a number of other options that are similar to that one. So there are frame tools, and then there are these shape tools. We'll start with the shape tools, although the frame tools work basically the same. If I select the rectangle shape tool, notice the arrow has changed to this little kind of crosshair symbol, and I can draw a rectangle of any size or shape that I like. And there it is. So I've drawn that shape. If I go back down here and I select the ellipse tool, again by pressing down on that lower right hand corner and selecting the ellipse tool, then I can draw an ellipse and just drag it out to whatever size I like. As long as I remain on this tool, every time I click over here, it's going to try and draw an ellipse for me. So I'm going to go back to the direct selection tool. This is the handy all-purpose tool, so that I'm not constantly drawing ellipses. Once you've drawn these basic shapes, notice that they're just shapes right now. They don't actually create any lines on the page. What we're seeing here, the black is the outline of the page, the red is the outline of the margins, the page margins. But we're seeing that because we're in what's called normal view. Down here at lower left, you can change that view. If you go to preview and see what this would actually look like if you printed it, and if you click off of the thing, you'll see that the default stroke for these shapes is this very thin black line. The stroke is what we call the color and width of the line that follows the outline of the shape. I've got this here on my right-hand menu, this stroke menu, but you can also find it under, where is it here? Window. So here's stroke, here's swatches. If you want to get those from another place, I've got them already docked over here on my window. You can go into the stroke window here. If you have an object selected here, you can change the weight of the line, which is the thickness of the line, and you can change various types of, the type of line that you're drawing, something like that. If you hit swatches, either by hitting here or switching to the swatches tab here, swatches is what InDesign calls colors. So they've got default swatches here. If you change to blue, for example, we've just changed the interior of the shape to blue because right up here, the fill is what we had selected. If you click on the outlined one, that selects your stroke color. And then if we choose a swatch, it changes the stroke and not the fill. Notice that in either case, if you want to go back to fill here, you can change the fill to none, meaning that it's transparent, or you can change it to paper, meaning it's the same color as your paper, in this case white. And notice how we're no longer able to see the corner of the rectangle underneath if we switch to paper. So for now, we'll just go back to none on this, and we can change our stroke and fill accordingly in our other shape as well. There's also this thing called the indirect selection tool. This is the white arrow, not the black arrow. This allows you to select an object, but it will allow you to select the individual points that make up that object. All these objects are paths that are defined mathematically as Bezier curves. In this case, an oval can be defined by 4 control points, each one with handles to form this Bezier curve. The direct selection tool, this white arrow, allows you to select one point and manipulate it individually. So that allows us to change the shape and modify the shape of this ellipse however we want. You can move the control point by just holding down and dragging it. And you can also move the handles, which allows you to change the shape in various ways depending on how you pull these handles out. Bezier curves allow you great control over the shape of curved lines, but they're not always intuitive to use. So it takes a little bit of practice to be able to draw a shape or modify a shape in the way that you want. Down here, right underneath the direct selection tool, you have some other tools that will allow you to customize these shapes further. So the pen with the plus sign, it allows you to add a new anchor point somewhere on a path, and then once you've added it, you can then drag it and modify it however you like. Notice that I actually dragged both of those because I had them both selected. Both of those points are currently selected, so they're both going to move. If I click out here and click back here, I can select one at a time. If I hold Shift, it allows you to select multiple points at once, and then you can drag all 3 of those at once, and they will maintain their relative spacing from one another. If you highlight the little arrow here, you can change to a delete anchor point tool, which allows you to get rid of one or more of the points. And you also have this convert direction point tool, which allows you to take a rounded point and make it into a sharp point by changing the way that its handles work. Next thing we want to talk about is the scissors tool, which allows us to change between closed and open paths. Both of the paths that I created, both of the shapes that I created, are closed. In other words, the rectangle doesn't have an opening. it has an inside and an outside, but it's a continuous curve. If we take the scissors tool here, we get these crosshairs, and the scissors tool allows us to cut a path in two. And if you go back to the direct selection tool, we just sliced open the path there, and now we've got two different points that allow us to open it up. Notice what happens if we have a fill. If we go to swatches and create some kind of colored fill, it will change the way that that fill operates. It's kind of going to try to close the path there by filling that in. If we take another scissors tool and make another slice in this object, now we have two separate paths that we've created by cutting them apart from one another. You can take an open path and turn it into a closed path by going up to objects and paths. You can open path, close path, reverse path flips the inside and the outside. So this is an open path right now, so I can close it, and notice what happens. It takes those last 2 points, turns them into Bezier curves, which is why we get the rounded handle there. If we go back and convert those points, we'll get the straight shot across. The type tool, that's the T here. And the type tool is what allows you to use words. And a lot of you will want to use words when you are creating your logos. You might want to create something like a word mark. The type tool gives you this shape, and if you drag a box, it will create a text box for you. And you'll get a cursor inside that text box, and now you can type. Notice that once we have the type in here, and once we have the text box, if we double click on that, it selects the type, or we can select it by dragging across it. And up here we can manipulate the font and choose any font we want, and we can manipulate the size of that font and make it any size we want. We can manipulate the, this is actually the font, the other one is technically the typeface, so we can change between bold and italic. And there's various other options for size, and if you want to change the color of the font, notice that over here on the swatches, it's got a T for text color. We can change the text color to whatever color we like, let's say green. And when we unselect it, we see that it's green. Now, when you are creating logos, a very useful thing to be able to do is to take this text word that we've created and turn it into a series of vector graphics with control points that we can individually manipulate. Right now, it's a 6-letter word, but if we go down to type, on the type menu, we can choose this create outlines. And what happens now, if we click that, is that if we go back and click somewhere else and then click here, we'll have to zoom in. This is, by the way, where you zoom in on my version. On the newer version, the zoom is up at the top. If we click on the direct selection tool, now you can see the individual control points that make up all of these letters. And if you choose one and drag it, you can actually change the shape of the individual letters. And you can manipulate this in all the same ways that we just manipulated other vector graphics up at the top. If you go up to Object, Paths, and hit Release Compound Path, one thing that it does is it means that each of these letters is now a separate object that we can individually manipulate. If you drag your selection tool over a space, it will select all of the objects that you dragged over. So if I drag this way, right, it's going to select the T and the H, and now I can manipulate them together. The last thing that you might want to really know how to do, if you select one, you hit Shift and hold down, you can select another. Shift and hold down, you can select another. Shift and hold down and select another. If you've got a group of objects selected, it's very frequently useful to be able to align them. I've got this on my menu here. It's also under Window, Window, Object and Layout, Align. Or Shift F7 will bring up the same dialog box. These allow you to align all the objects in various ways. We're aligning to selection right now, so we're going to align these things to each other. If we want to align them all so that they all have the same top edges, align to the top edges of the highest one, then we do that. If we want to align them all to the bottom edges, we can do that. We can also distribute the spacing. We can say, let's put these things 0 inches apart, so let's put them all together horizontally. Or we can say, if we get rid of this, unclick that box, we'll say distribute this spacing evenly. So now those things are all evenly spaced. So I think that is all I need to tell you for now. You can play around with this more, but everything that is on the quiz has been explained.